Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Papi and Chulo show. I am Chulo.
I am Papi.
And you're joining us for another great episode where it's with a couple of good Latino men who are trying to strive to be better. And how are you doing, Papi? How's your day?
Good day, very productive. Normally I prefer Sunday to be more relaxed, but if the work is needed to be completed, then that's what had to be done. But it is complete. It is finished.
Or as some others say, consummatum est, but I won't get into the Latin of that. I had a little bit of a similar thing, just a bit of a busy day, but it's been a good one. So there's that. So on that, catapulting, what's the main topic that we're going to cover today?
You know, I've been hearing a lot recently on many TikTok videos or Instagram, a lot of this fat pride. Fat pride could, I don't really think that there's a good way to interpret it. It is essentially saying, I am good in this physical state, and I should be proud of it, versus I am happy as a person regardless of what physical state I am. Maybe that is a more healthier approach to have. What about you? Is that your general take on it as well?
Yeah, similar. I think it's been, the world is pursuing the whole fat pride thing as a general sense of acceptance, and I think in order to fully comprehend what it means to be a human who's constantly striving, you need to step away from that and step away from, in general, any sense of pride that's not merited. And I think this is one of those things that's definitely not merited.
Yeah. One of the things that they're saying to support their case is that they're born this way, that it is outside of their control, and to a certain extent, that is true. Genetics plays a huge role in your bone structure, in your weight, in your fat content, and how much it prefers to maintain within its body. But at the same time, it's denying certain contexts, which is nature and nurture, external factors, things you consume, and how it affects you.
Yeah, I honestly, I think coming from the perspective of someone who has history of, I'll share it, a history with cancer, and that my thyroid, I don't have a thyroid anymore because it was cancerous, and the thyroid controls a lot of things, and all the hormones, the different hormones that that it produces in your body. Even for me, if I don't take my medication properly, I cannot lose weight. And if I take too much of it, there's a possibility of me losing weight a little bit faster because of the control of the metabolism. So there are certain factors, like you said, there are certain factors that have to be taken into account. But I think in our world today, it's actually not a lot of that. So I think one of the things that I noticed when I started looking into weight loss was how many calories I was actually consuming. And taking personal responsibility of like, no, hold on a second. I can't just blame it on my medication or blame it on the fact that I don't have a thyroid anymore. It's more of, no, I probably shouldn't be eating, 5 or 6 tacos from Taco Cell Gordo down the street. It's you actually have to take that into account, your personal responsibility through all that. What do you think in the sense of people thinking that they have no control over it? What are your general thoughts on that?
You have told me in person before those wise words of, you work with the cards that you were dealt with. and I apologize for my breathing right now. I ate some hot sauce. I ate some Chinese soup with some hot sauce in it.
We forgive you.
And it's making me breathe like as if I were a very heavy or set person. Like, yeah. Anywho, there are certain things that are within our control, and there are things that are not. So what can you control what you can't control. So your eating habits, your exercise, your rest, your recovery, very important. For myself, I think well, I would say you and I have gone through our ups and downs in our weights, and you've seen me when I've been heavier. I think once I got into that journey of just seeing how good I felt about myself emotionally, physically, and psychologically, as I developed this routine of eating better, sleeping better, recovering better, you just get hooked on it, and you realize you just prefer living better. Now, did it take a while to get there? Yeah. Did it take a lot of feeling like crap, feeling bad about yourself, judging yourself, comparing yourself? By all means, yeah. But you mentioned something about your history with cancer. One thing that I was recently reading in a medical article, it mentioned how just losing 5% of body weight for women, it reduces breast cancer by 12%, and and gives huge benefits to people who take blood pressure medication, oftentimes needing to stop taking those mild blood pressure medications. So even minimal changes has long lasting effects.
Yeah, you can. You had mentioned it earlier, but just doing those small changes, the difference that it makes in how you feel. Just when you eat very heavy food, things with like refined sugars and refined carbs, I noticed that that at the end of the day you feel just exhausted, or even if a couple of hours later. One of the things that I started implementing recently is, well, within the last year, is not eating breakfast. I feel a lot better when I don't eat breakfast. But what I did notice is whenever I do eat something and I start eating it, and if I start by eating when I break my fast is like carbs, like bread, or just a piece of chocolate or something, that it kind of sets the tone for how my body feels that day. And I feel kind of inflammation in the knees, inflammation in the back, and I realize that it sets the tone for the day and almost for the week, depending on when I'm starting all this. And it just, yeah, you feel like crap through all of it. But then when you compare that when you're eating a salad or you're just eating lean protein, man, you feel just night and day difference.
Let me ask you this, Chulo. Have you ever had your heart broken? This is
Well,
random, but have you ever had your heart broken?
random.
Just yes or no.
Yes, and
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
just okay. I'll stop there.
That's it. That's it. That's no need
All
to
right,
get
all
in
right.
there more. Have you ever lost a loved one?
Yeah, actually, is recently I have.
Okay. In those two scenarios, was it? Um, did you consume a lot of food, a lot more food than normal?
A funny thing, initially I stopped eating, but
Okay, which is a
as
reaction.
yeah, which is a reaction. But as afterwards, trying to kind of get over it, I realized I just went for the comfort food, just garbage food and everything that was comfortable. So, yeah.
Okay, so that's exactly what I'm getting at. Imagine if I were to hear you in that state. Let's say we were catching up after all this passed, and I were to be like, Chulo, dude, come on. You know, all you need is just willpower. Just willpower, bro. That's all you need. You have to push through. Um, I would say, you would say, go away. Like, stop bothering me. I'm already feeling like crap, and you're only
And
making me feel worse.
in a nice way, yes.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when I hear the stories of people who are pushing this whole fat pride thing, I'm trying to see where they're coming from. Obviously, it would not be good for anybody to mock, to belittle, to shame a person who is overweight, who, yeah, like physically overweight, not that they see themselves as overweight, but who legitimately has a higher BMI, body mass index, that puts them in that category. The problem is where you deny, you hide, you mask your actions that are keeping you there, and rather you boast about it. You hold it to high esteem. That would be unwise, unhealthy, and not based on reality. because at that point you're denying science, and you're also denying what is physically, psychologically, emotionally better for you as well. Um, but I do understand why they're becoming so defensive. They're defending their identity, their heart in a way, because they don't want to be shamed, they don't want to be hurt, they don't want to be mocked. So they're taking embracing your identity in a very extreme, distorted way. What are your thoughts?
It almost feels, and I say that feels in a very intentional way. It almost feels as though it's the people who are overweight, obese, have the emotional response, and they're viewing it through the lens of emotion because it's so difficult to deal with. Which I get it. It is difficult to deal with that, especially if you're not happy with where you are. And the unfortunate thing, what the exact response that you gave was a solution that's based on of a almost, I guess, in a factual way. Like, well, you just need to do this: eat less calories, stop eating sugar, stop drinking soda, stuff like that. So you're the response to an emotional appeal is not by throwing out a fact right away. It's coming to comprehend and understand the person. If you really want to reach that person, because I'm assuming that's exactly what you want to do when you're having a conversation like that. So I think trying to understand the other side, you have to stop and say, I recognize what you're doing. I see I see how you're feeling about this. Sit with that and then move forward. And then saying, all right, what's the solution to this? If you really want to move forward, what's the solution to this?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you're now actually walking along the lines of, if we were actually to engage in conversation with a person who may be our coworker, our friend, our family member, our sister, who comes up to you and says, I would prefer that you don't tell me to lose weight or tell me to go work out with you because it would be good for me. I think you just need to accept this for what it is. I'm perfect and beautiful, yes, and I don't need to change. I am more than healthy. So if it were that circumstance, how would you respond? Do you just agree with her in everything she just said, biologically, physiologically, or would you, you would have? I would imagine that you and I will come up with ways to actually meet her where she's at and try to actually challenge at least the distortions that might be there.
Well, you can't just fully embrace someone just because you're afraid to hurt their feelings. That's the thing. I think, yes, there is a proper time and a place, but the problem is if somebody sits in that and they don't want to hear any pushback, then you're not going to do any good. There has to be some pushback, and recognize that that the things that you are doing and the things that you are saying are not to try to hurt the person intentionally. But it's like, look, I actually, it's what true love is. So as Thomas Aquinas says, truly loving a person is desiring the good for the other, just for them being another, right? So if you truly love someone, you're going to call them out on it because you know that it's not good for them. You have to. There's no other way around it. Now, if a person doesn't approach you and doesn't ask you for that, I don't necessarily think, well, I'm not going to go out of my way and try to correct you if you're already shut off to me, and the more I talk, you're just going to continue to be shut off. I'm just not going to say anything. There's really no purpose for me to do that.
You would have to read the room, and I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
you would, and I hope I would as well. You would read the room. You would find an opportunity. If she just said that whole spiel to you that I just said, you would say, well, what do you mean about being perfectly healthy? Like healthy in mind and in happiness, or like legitimately physically healthy? And then you can make distinctions if they were willing.
Yeah.
But the reason why I think you and I would agree that if we love the person or if we care for the person, we would say something. A analogy that I heard, an example that I heard is, if you knew somebody was about to drink a glass of wine, and you knew that that glass of wine was poisonous, would you say something? Would you let your friend? Would you make them aware, or would you even wipe away the glass from their hands as they're about to drink it? Because maybe they don't believe you or they don't agree with you. They poured it from the bottle themselves. So, of course, you wouldn't swipe at a person who believes in fat pride, but you would I would hope that you would challenge it for their own good.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good pushback. Yeah, at some point you would have to, but again, it's like you're saying, read the room, right? Read the room. You're not. I think a slow burn poison is very different if somebody is poisoning themselves and they're gonna drop dead at the moment. So like if my uncle is completely just so obese and he's already had a heart attack, and all he wants is just a bite of another cheeseburger, or in my Mexican situation, a good greasy taco del pastor, like a nice greasy taco. Yeah, you darn right I'm gonna swipe that thing out of their hand. But I don't know. What do you think? What do you think the difference between the slow burn poison versus the immediate? What do you think?
Wow, what a great example. So let's just add a similar example, just to add to your example. As a nurse, I've had scenarios where even in the hospital, a person who may be in hospice or even not in hospice, but they're 80 years old, they have comorbidities, they're about to croak, but they're still kind of semi-functional. And the doctor recognizes where they are and goes ahead and orders in a hospital a case of beer. Or not a case, maybe like 3 or 4 beers. So even in nursing homes, they do this, where they'll give their patients beers or whatever else is allowed.
If they're at the point of death, but that's not the thing that's causing their death, though, right? That's the difference.
For the person who just had a heart attack, he's 80 years old, also comorbidities, and he's your who did you say, your uncle?
My uncle, for example.
Your uncle.
It's a make believe example, but yeah.
And he's like, Chulo, por favor, just un taquito. My favorite, un chalupa, whatever you guys cook. I don't know Mexican culture. I'm sorry if I just dissed you.
No. Well, hold on, just a random side note. What is the Peruvian dish?
The fatty dish is
the fatty
pollo
dish, yeah,
a la brasa, which is rotisserie chicken with Peruvian style French fries and some salad on the side.
Okay, so rotisserie chicken and a ton of potatoes. Yeah, that sounds fitting too.
Greasy, yummy. I'm hungry thinking about it.
Okay, all right. Pulling it back.
So, reading the room, that's a different scenario of a person who two people had to have lived their lives, and we're in agreement that it's quality over quantity of life, like the longer living. It's about quality of life. Versus a young person in their 20s, high BMI, 300 pounds. They're reaching a point where their weight is affecting their daily, their ADLs, activities of daily living. So in that situation, yeah, the context is different for them. The circumstances are different. And so it would be appropriate for us to challenge that, I would say.
All right, fair enough. I really don't got any pushback to that. That's good.
Yeah. It makes me really curious, though, as to why. It's like the people who come up with this, they know better. Like, they know what they're doing. A lot of these people who are making these cultural shifts, pushing these ideologies, they recognize, a lot of them have PhDs, they recognize that it's contradicting established medical precedents.
Yeah.
Just the same way as the whole LGBT movement, though more specifically the transsexual movement, right? I think it's the
Yep.
transsexual movement,
Yep.
is challenging the medical precedent of sexes. Now, I understand there could be an argument about genders. I still need to make myself more aware of the differences.
Yeah, so just to kind of cut in, if you don't mind me jumping in here real quick. The interesting thing about that is, depending on the people that you talk to, some will argue, well, sex and gender is different, but when it comes to the nitty gritty, they will still use sex and gender interchangeably. So for one example, I have a friend whose wife is a doctor, and this doctor, she works with women, and just I think mainly women, but mainly family practice. I don't quite remember what it was, but he was telling me that in this new system that they have, that they just updated to, there's multiple different options for not just gender, but the sex can be male, female, or other, because they're using sex and gender interchangeably. That's the issue. And the funny thing about it, there's a little note, a little tab, just to be clear, in case it's not confusing for the doctors, to say this person is capable of getting pregnant. Like that's how much they're willing to push back against reality. that they have to, even doctors who are well educated have to kind of toe the line. Who was it? Was it Chesterton? Somebody else who said there are some ideas so crazy that only intellectuals can believe them. And I feel like this kind of falls into that. Or some ideas so crazy or so stupid that only intellectuals can actually believe them, which is kind of fitting with what's going on with the fat pride movement, and with the mainly the trans movement in today's world. So,
but I would say that there's two boxes for those intellectuals. Some intellectuals that go along with it because they truly have adopted the ideology because it fits so well. 2 + 2 = this, plus this equals this. It fits. And then there's the other intellectuals that go along with because they've either been coerced, or you better say it, but you better agree with it or else. Yeah. And we're seeing a lot with that, of course, in the pandemic, of course, in these cultural shifts. Yeah, it's do it or else. So,
yeah, the interesting thing about all of this is you start questioning, are these things good and healthy, or are these things good for society? And you either get two responses. They throw every kind of label on you just to try to discredit you. But the other thing that I've noticed is, well, what do you even care? Why do you even care? What has even bothered you? What other people are doing with their lives? But one thing that I've noticed that to me I've always come back to, it's like, it affects me because I live in society, and affects everyone else because we're living in a society. And these are the structures that we have in place, and they've been built there for a reason. And I think it was Chesterton's Orthodoxy book, where he talks about the difference between orthodoxy and heterodoxy. The Orthodox is going to look at a fence and say, why was this built in the first place? Meanwhile, a person who's more heterodox will look at it and say, well, let's tear it down because it's in the way. And I think there's a reason why we have these different things in our society. Why? And they're based in biology. They're based in, common sense in general. I would say, like, it's not good to be fat. It's not a healthy thing. Yes, there are external factors, but if you are obese and you're barely waddling around, it's not good for you, and it's not good for society. Jumping into that, you start looking at another reason why we care, because it takes the toll on everything that we're paying, right? Insurance, things like that. The systems that we're paying into. The more people have to utilize these different programs because they're unhealthy, the more the rest of us are going to get charged, especially if you're going through public funding, right? Through governmental programs and things like that. So we care because it affects us in one way or the other, whether you're talking about trans movement or whether you're talking about obesity.
Okay, I'm catching everything you're throwing. I'm catching it. It makes sense. Let's take a step back. and I'm going to be challenging here.
All right.
So I don't really think you know where they're coming from, people who are LGBT. There is a person out there male, who is legitimately attracted and has been attracted to other males his whole life. Same for females. There are people, a male who has always been feminine and found himself most comfortable in female communities, female groups. And perhaps his feminine attributes, his feminine characteristics, rather, were fostered even more, and so it became more pronounced. But that's the way things happened for him. So, I understand that you're already coming to a conclusion about where you stand with this, but these are, from what it seems, as very natural evolution of a person's life in modern society. So,
through the way they're nurtured, I'd agree with that. Yeah, through nurture.
There are circumstances, and I'm speaking on a side booth along with you. There's definitely circumstances where they weren't nurtured that way, and they turned out to be that way.
So let's make a distinction real quick. We're
Sure.
talking about, you know, feminine men or masculine women. We're talking about homosexual men and homosexual women, female, lesbians. So that is in another category compared to the trans movement. So which one are we talking about? Because I want to clarify.
I guess the first then.
So homosexuality.
I don't know why we're making a distinction. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm talking about people who want to live a certain way according to how they identify and who they're sexually attracted to.
Because this is the thing, though. The reason I'm making this distinction is because the trans movement is not necessarily about who you are sexually attracted to. It is about how you are looking at yourself. Whether it's like, I view myself as a pansexual person, or I see myself as a frog and I identify as frog and frog self, which is actually a thing that somebody apparently on TikTok posted, which is interesting. So that's why there's a distinction there. So if you're talking about sexual attraction, I completely agree. There are people that are sexually attracted to the same sex that feel more comfortable in that. Now,
You're right, because I did hear of a scenario of a woman who transitioned, did the hormones, testosterone, and whatever else she could to become a man, identified as a man, but she was attracted to men.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, she was attracted to men, so she would call herself and identify herself as a gay trans man, because she would call herself a man, and therefore if she's a man attracted to a man, she would be gay. But in reality, she's viewing herself in one way, which is unfortunately not seeped in reality, I would say. Meanwhile, her sexual attraction to men is something that's still ordered in the proper sense. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think there's a giant distinction there. So slightly going on.
Let's just touch the.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Let's just touch the first part then. At least for homosexual men, lesbian women, attraction and sexual engagement with same-sex partners. Why is that bad?
Because
you can't use religion.
No, I'm not. Well, I'm not going to use religion, but I will say this. Every single one of us, if we dive down to the philosophy behind it, every single one of us has a duty to fulfill who we are. And I'm going from
who?
Says, I would say, and it's not a religious argument, but it is a philosophical one, the natural law, in which there are things and there are ways that you as a human being are designed, and you are supposed to allow those proper functions to occur. Now, if there is a disorder, so I'm going to use language that it's philosophical language, that it's disorder not in the sense that it's wrong in itself, but disordered in that it's not of the proper way how it's supposed to happen. So, for example, the way men and women are built, you are supposed to be attracted to the opposite gender for two particular reasons: for procreation, that's the natural side of things, but also for bonding, because that's another human thing that we need. So if a person is attracted to the same gender, that means that there is a disorder that's been from what your nature is. And I think you have a duty to yourself, to your species as a human being, to fulfill that order. And I know it's not an easy thing, but I think it is a necessary thing to remember. We are all called to be part of, because we're all part of this fabric of society. We're all supposed to be fulfilling these things within ourselves. You and I are a part of society, and part of our duty to the society that we live in is fulfilling some good within the society. If society looked different, then our fulfillments would look different. But right now, I don't know. Does that make sense? Am I going off too much in the weeds?
Chulo, my friend, I'm catching what you're throwing here. But listen, as a practicing homosexual male who's attracted to other men and sexually engaged with other men, are you really calling me a natural? Is that what you're doing right now?
No, not at all.
You're saying I'm disordered?
I'm not saying you are disordered.
Unnatural?
Not at all. I'm not calling you disordered. I am
what
saying
about
that
men who feel and act this way?
Okay.
You just use those words.
Yes, I did. Good point. But I'm saying that the acts themselves are disordered, and it's not the human being that's disordered. The desire is the disorder. It's not the human being itself. Because you still have the capability to do these things, but you are not disordered than yourself. You are not your attractions. That's the thing. You are not your attractions.
That's a very good distinction there. Actually, I just learned something right there. But I can understand a male-on-male intercourse being harmful for the person, because I do know that, I forget where it was done, but I learned a while ago that there was a large study of the average lifespan of homosexual men. I believe it was in the 80s. Now, yes, this was during the maybe the later part of the AIDS epidemic. And that's when things were less known, and AIDS was affecting very, very aggressively the homosexual community. But the average lifespan was 44 years old, I believe, 42 to 44, somewhere there. Which was a big shocker for a lot of people, because that's pretty darn young. I mean, that for you and I, that's like around the corner. You know?
Yeah.
So, what is it that is causing sexually active homosexual men to die so young? Well, penetration of the anus was something that the body was never intended for. It doesn't have the lubrication. Its intestinal lining, rectal sphincter, was never meant to be used in that way. It wastens away, wear and tear. It makes it susceptible to bacterial and parasitic infection. And even your GI system could be affected. These are all things that I've heard. And I'll go ahead and admit this. I feel no shame. It's rather out of curiosity and actually even scientific medical exposure. I follow this Instagram channel of a sexually active homosexual doctor who discusses the latest things to know within the gay community. And he usually does informative videos of how to lubricate, how to prepare, how to best engage in sexual activity, power bottom, or I don't really put it in my memory slot too much. But anywho, some of the most recent videos is him. What was it? Was it that monkey virus that was in Spain, monkeypox or monkey? The one that was going rampant through the Spain homosexual community, and they were warning. The WHO was warning the international community about it potentially being the next worst thing coming after the pandemic.
Wow.
Anywho, I haven't heard of anything since then. But anywho, I heard it there, and then I also heard there is developing gonorrhea and chlamydia. So, not antibiotic resistant versions of chlamydia and gonorrhea, which means that these people, the people in this community, have had it enough times, and they've got it treated enough times by the same antibiotics, that now those bacteria strains are becoming like super powerful.
Wow.
The comparison is, if I train with you in boxing, eventually you get to know how Papi fights, and Papi and then you as Chulo will just get bigger and better, and then eventually Papi won't be able to overcome you. It's this easy example. So those are two things that I recently learned from this channel. So that I could understand. I could see that as a medical case as to why the human body for males were not meant to be, but for females, I can't really see an argument for that, since it isn't penetration. It isn't. I would say it's probably more so emotional love.
For females,
there's no actual physical harm happening. This disorder, this unnaturalness.
You know what's interesting that came to mind. Gosh, was it in the which ancient civilization was it? I want to say the Aztecs or the Mayans, or
I was going to say the Romans, because they were into that freaky stuff.
Yeah, Romans were something. Romans and the Greeks, man, there were something. As great as their philosophies have become to be known, some of the stuff is just oof. But I remember hearing, and I'm pretty sure it's one of the native indigenous civilizations, but it was okay for men to be considered to be homosexual and do homosexual acts, but it was considered an abomination for women to engage in those, mainly because they had a duty to procreate and repopulate the civilization and keep society going, because of how important they are. And for men, in basic terms, it's like, man, you're useless in this situation, because we can get any guy to get these girls pregnant. But it's like, it's funny how it's the opposite. So what you're saying is, if you're looking at mainly just the health side of things, it does no physical harm to the human body, and there's no physical human harm happening to the human body. So it would be more acceptable in these terms, not in any religious terms or any other philosophical terms that I'm putting out there, but solely based on the damage done to the body. It would be more acceptable for a woman to engage in this than it would be for a man, when in ancient civilizations it would be reversed, which is hilarious.
Or at least in this example.
Yeah, exactly. So interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, kind of moving with the topic. I recently heard the comparison of how coming out, whether it's coming out as gay or lesbian, or as a homosexual or lesbian, or coming out as let's just leave it at that, is kind of replacing the traditional cultural steps of growth, of maturity, of becoming, like it used to be, becoming a man or becoming a woman. The Sweet 16 in the Mexican culture, I know, is a very big deal for them
The
because it's when
quinceañeras.
you become a woman. For the Jewish people, the bar mitzvah, what is it, age 13?
I think so, around there.
Becoming a man. For primitive cultures, killing your first predator, bringing back its heart. Or I even heard one story of a boy for a tribe. The boy had to stay overnight in the open jungle with only one weapon in hand, and he had to endure the whole night, knowing that he could be eaten by whatever night predator there happens to be, and he just had to last the night. And if he did, then he became a man because he wasn't able to endure the night. So for today, what is the becoming, the entrance into the new stage in life? It is this whole coming out movement. It is this whole I am I'm a transsexual. I am Zieger, whatever. It's all that.
It's almost like it, from what I've noticed, is that there's a lot of kids who feel the pressure to wanting to say, I have to be a part of this. And what's the number of people that are starting to come out? Like, I mean, it's got to be a giant exponential growth in terms of who identifies as LGBT compared to other generations.
I heard that they're spending in the U.S. a 4,000% increase in girls deciding that they're boys.
4,000.
Yeah. I forget the exact age group, but it has to be within 14 to 18, high school age, I'm assuming. And what I'm mentioning before, it isn't just you saying I am this now, but it's also your whole attire, your clothing, how you dress. And it's so important, this cultural shift, this entrance into this new stage for you, that even the people around you have to start addressing you the way that you're coming out now. Your parents, your teachers, everybody. And if you don't, there's consequences for those people in some countries.
Yeah, I mean, look at America's Hat, Canada. You can dead name someone. Dead name is the term, right? Where you call the person by the name that they no longer use, and if you use that name, it's considered violence against the person.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating to even conceive of. Well, I was going to mention, I think in New York, some people either got arrested or it's going in that direction as well here in the United States. So more liberal states are starting to fall into that. I know it's very frowned upon in states in California. If you speak like that, you will at least be publicly shamed, and it's a cancelable offense. And if you're in a situation like that at work, you can possibly happen. So I used to teach at a Catholic high school, Catholic in quotes, and they're very pro using the new pronouns and all about that, and they're going in that same direction. So it's really heartbreaking. It's sad, and the crazy thing about it is, if I know that if you don't go along with it, and it's made public, it would have been potential that would have been a fireable offense. A student came up to me and told me that she now identified as trans or as they or something like that. And I had to pull her, and I said I actually had to pull her aside, and I said, that I care about you. She had some health issues going on in her life at the time, and I said, I care about you, and I've always had love and respect for you and your family, and due to my faith, due to the way due to this, I'm sorry, but I cannot call you by those pronouns. But I did say, look, from what I will do from here forward, out of a respect for you, without violating my my conscience, I said, when I refer to you, I will always refer to you by your name, and I just left it at that. So it was a little annoying because it's like always having to repeat her name over and over and over again. So it was a great way for her to get out of me calling on her during class. So there's that.
Man, what a tough situation.
Yeah.
Now, I guess there's so much nitty gritty to discuss, like even the topic of pronouns. Why is it bad? Why can't we just respect this new culture that has developed? Because there's new culture developing everywhere.
Yeah.
So, um,
Maybe we can save that topic for another episode, because I think that it would be really good to dive deep into that, because there's a lot to say, and there's a
yeah.
few points that I would want to cover on that. So let's save that one for a different episode.
Yeah. The last thing I want to mention on this issue of coming out is one of the reasons why I think it just may be a trend, especially in the high school years, is because there's been many scenarios. There is no study that I've heard of, but just I've heard it through the grapevine from many different groups of people and throughout the U.S. is there's coming out sessions, there's clusters. They usually do it together, but there's been circumstances where one or two people moved away from that environment, and where they went to, let's say they didn't have this ideology, and then that teenager, reverted back to not that ideology,
Yeah.
to what they were before.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah.
so how much is it really you following who you're genetically are versus just following the crowd?
Yeah. Well,
Especially when there's a statistic saying there's a 4,000% increase of girls identifying as boys. Like we would have noticed that historically at some point 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was. I was one of the things I wanted to mention. There was, in one sense, an understanding of something like that, but it was nowhere near it. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's lesbian, and she was telling me she's an older lady, and she said, I don't understand what the heck these kids are doing nowadays. And she said, you know what? But she said, I will say this, that if I would have been raised in today's society, she's like, I probably would have been in that movement. The reason why, she's like, I was a tomboy growing up. And she's like, that just meant that she was a girl that had more masculine not features, but masculine desires, masculine, just like to hang out with the boys, right? And that today would technically be considered, well, then you're trans, but it's not. And it's interesting though, because she said if I would have been in that movement, I probably wanted to go all the way. But she said it's funny because she realizes that how harmful it would have been, because she's happy with who she is. So why go through that whole process just to kind of come back and say, yeah, I'm okay with who I am. Yeah. So I'll end on that note.
The thing that does bother me though, it's like, okay, we could have our differences in what we believe, but when you start crossing that line of promoting this ideology, like for example, I heard in a grammar school, a professor who happens to be the high school so it was a high school professor in a high school. He happens to be the high school coach for a winning football team. And in the class that he teaches, he has these questionnaires where he asks the students, who in this room would you be sexually, if you had to have a same-sex partner, who would you choose? Just put the initials.
What?
And then what would you do with them? Multiple choice. A, B, C, D, E. This is all under the guise of discovering your sexuality and your possible sexual preferences. And the person
Wow.
who is bringing this up is a father of one of these girls in the high school, who is confronting the superintendent and the administrators in one of those public forums. So they're forced. They're public officials. They can't. It has to be an open meeting. As long as he's following the rules of the code of conduct, he's allowed to say whatever he wants to say. So the father's keeping his cool, and he's like, it's essentially him just reading what the questionnaire asks.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't deny it. They can't. He has the paper in front of him, and he did share one key detail. He's like, and when the students asked for those questionnaires back, he said no. So the father was like, I wonder what that guy is doing with these questionnaires that he had all his teens filling out. Maybe he's enjoying himself back at home, And I was like,
Wow.
So Papa Bear came out. Papa Bear came out in a very good way, cool, calm, and collected. And he essentially said, to the administrators, you either do something about this, or I will go to the law enforcement and file a complaint. And I don't know what came out of it, but this is a good trend. I've been hearing of enough Papa Bears, Mama Bears doing something about it.
Yeah.
The
The parents are standing up, which is great. That's what's starting to happen, and they're not just sending their kids to school anymore and saying, just go learn, and whatever they tell you, it's true. The kids are coming home and they're realizing, oh, these kids are being taught some crazy ideas. So,
and have you heard this? In a way, we have the pandemic to thank for this, because
yep.
Parents did not know what they were being taught. Not until they overheard the audio of their Zoom classrooms did they become aware of this. So there's that, and I would say that's pretty crazy that there was a legitimate political movement from mainly one political party that was trying to say parental rights should not supersede school administrator rights, whatever, because parents do not because we are trained professionals.
Yeah.
It was their main argument.
Jeez.
Yeah. Now even that is a whole debate to itself, or a topic to itself, because there are circumstances where there is bad parenting. Let's say it's a devout vegan parent and they only feed their child vegan foods, but it may be hurting the baby, for example. Like you can't, there are circumstances where the government, the state, should intervene. And that's
There was an episode of House about that, by the way.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll talk about that one day soon.
Yeah. All right, great. All right, any closing thoughts?
I'm looking forward to this next week coming up. A lot of big challenges, and I'll share them in the next podcast.
All right, great. Me too. All right, if you enjoyed this podcast, check us out. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, anywhere you like to listen, whether that's Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and then check us out on YouTube. So in the future, we'll be posting more stuff, and stay tuned for some more Papi and Chulo.
Yeah, let us know what you guys want us to talk about. We are eager to talk about it, to learn first, to share our thoughts, our opinions. We are all here to learn.
Yeah, though we have some strong opinions about certain things, the whole purpose of this is to continue to learn, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, we want to be challenged too, so just ask us your tough questions. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, on that note, I am Chulo.
I am Papi.
And you have been listening to the Papi and Chulo podcast.
Take care, guys.